Hi friends, Edie Summers here. I just wanted to share some information with you in case it's useful. So I wrote a book on chronic fatigue and how to get more energy, and also some of the topics concerning chronic illness, CFS. And one of the things that happened to me when I got diagnosed with CFS is that I took some genetic tests, and one of the genetic tests told me that I had a mutation in one of my genes, in several genes actually, but one of them is the MTHFR gene. There may be a short way of saying that, but I know what the joke is around saying that word, but I'm not going to say it. But the MTHFR gene, let me make sure I'm saying that right. MTHFR. Sometimes I mix up the order of the letters. And what that can do is it helps you with detoxification. And if you have a mutation in that gene, it can lead to fatigue, among other issues. And I'm not going to go into the details of the other issues, however, if you join my Facebook group, it's private. It's related to chronic fatigue support on Facebook. If you go to groups on Facebook, type in chronic fatigue support, there's a really great post in there right now that you can read from a doctor. And he wrote out all the explanation of what happens if you have this genetic mutation, and not only how it affects fatigue and detoxification, but it can affect, I believe, heart health, and many other factors in your body. But what I learned is that it can definitely be a contributing factor to creating a chronic fatigue in the body if you have this genetic mutation. And I also learned in my research in grad school that I believe this is connected, that about 40% of people that have chronic conditions, I believe, have this genetic mutation, if I'm understanding that correctly. So I do discuss methylation in my book, The Memory of Health. So you can also read about some of it in there. But I highly recommend joining our group here on Facebook. It's a private group, meaning that any post that you share, you can even be anonymous in there, is going to be completely private, and even potentially anonymous if you want to remain anonymous. So sometimes people, when they're talking about very difficult subjects in their lives, like, chronic illness or not feeling well, they want to have private conversations. So it's a really great active group. There are 3,700 people in there. I do also have a public page on Facebook called Chronic Fatigue Support. We have about 25,000 people on that page, and it's very active. Both my group and my page are very active, so feel free to come join us. But I want to invite you into this group because I'm gonna pin this post and highlight it at the top of the group, so you can always find it depending on when you're watching this video. But it's really well explained. It's a post that talks about methylation, the methylation process, and it really struck a chord with me because this is one of the main reasons that I deal with chronic fatigue. It's because I have this genetic mutation. So I'm going to share this with my groups and pages on Facebook as well. But and it'll be very useful for you if you're already in the group or on the page on Facebook here in Chronic Fatigue Support. Again, it's pretty easy to find the group. You can also, of course, join the page. A lot of people like to do both. But there's a really great post in there right now by a very talented and knowledgeable doctor who understands chronic fatigue syndrome. He understands it very well. He might even be taking patients. I'm not 100% sure, but you would have to reach out to him. But the name of the doctor is at the bottom of the post. So I highly recommend coming to join our group. You can look for this post here. Let me pull it up, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about my experience with it. And again, I do talk about this subject, methylation, in my book as well, The Memory of Health. I talk about a lot of subjects in my book that are related to what may cause chronic fatigue, what may cause chronic fatigue syndrome. Chronic fatigue is a symptom, so it's part of chronic fatigue syndrome, but also you can develop chronic fatigue for many, many reasons and due to many, many conditions and life circumstances. So I cover a bunch of those circumstances in my book, and also theories. I definitely talk about methylation, but this doctor writes it very, very well. He explains it super well in great detail. So let me give you his name. It's Dr. Anders, and here I'm going to pin this post right now in my group on chronic fatigue support, if it's easy to do. Let's see if I can pin it. Yeah, pinned to featured. I'm pinning it to featured in chronic fatigue support, our private group. So now the post is posted by Hana N. I don't want to say his name wrong. Nasraldeen. I think he works with Dr. With Dr. Anders. He works with him. But Dr. Anders is the CFS specialist, and he works with, I think, people with several types of conditions. But this is a great post, and this was a huge insight for me when I got diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome in 2005. I'd already been dealing with it since 1993. And I've had ups and downs with it. I've learned a lot of self-care tips and lifestyle tips that make a huge difference in my energy. But this is the main reason why I have trouble with chronic fatigue and why I developed CFS. This is the reason, I believe, is because I have poor methylation. I have a genetic mutation, and I went to see a doctor a long time ago. This is when I got diagnosed in 2005. He was a medical doctor, and then he got trained as a naturopath, and he was also trained as a Chinese medicine doctor. So he was an integrative doctor, an integrative specialist, and I highly recommend working with someone like that who has understandings of a lot of different, who can kind of look at the bigger picture and have a lot of training in a lot of different areas. The doctor who wrote this post that you'll find in here, and the beginning of the post talks about methylation, a process critical for our health, well-being, and aging process. You know what? I'm going to read some of this to you. And then I know that I believe he's an integrative doctor as well. He's a doctor, Dr. Anders. So he's the author of this. This again will be pinned to the top of the page. I highly recommend coming to join us in our group. Again, just search for the group Chronic Fatigue Support in Facebook. You can go to the search part of Facebook. I would go to the groups function first and then type in chronic fatigue support. It should pop up. There are about 3,700 of us in here. So let me read some of this to you, and then I'll talk about my experience, okay? So I'm going to read it to you because it's really relevant. I also recommend reading the actual post and coming to join us too. Now, keep in mind that people can develop chronic fatigue and/or chronic fatigue syndrome for many different reasons. And sometimes you have multiple things going on. You might even have other conditions going on as well. And people can develop chronic fatigue even if they don't have CFS. CFS is short for chronic fatigue syndrome. You can develop chronic fatigue because it's a symptom for different reasons. You can develop it from burnout. You can develop it from fibromyalgia. You can develop it from lupus. You can develop it from multiple sclerosis. It's a symptom, and it's common in a lot of chronic conditions. It's also common from having a lot of stress, like a lot of consistent stress in your life, being burned out from having too much work. There are so many different reasons that you can develop chronic fatigue, and chronic fatigue is a huge problem. It's been a huge, those of us who have CFS or some other type of chronic condition where chronic fatigue is a factor, we already know that it's a huge problem, that it's been around forever. We already know this, but it's becoming more of a problem. More and more people are developing chronic fatigue. So whatever the reason is that you may have chronic fatigue, or whatever the reason is that you might be looking for more energy, I encourage you to come join our groups. People are really great at sharing information, supporting one another. Again, my public page on Facebook is called Chronic Fatigue Support. There are 25,000 plus people on there, and it's super active. And then we have a private Facebook group called, I believe it's called Chronic Fatigue Support or something very similar. If you type in the phrase chronic fatigue support in the group section, it should come up. And we have 3,700 of us in there. It's private, but so it's much more, it's growing fast, but you can keep your privacy and anonymity in there if you want to. Okay, I'm going to read this to you. Methylation, a process critical for our health, well-being, and aging process. Have you ever heard of methylation? It may sound like a foreign concept, but it's actually a process that happens in every cell in your body. Methylation is a biochemical process in which a methyl group, CH3, is added to a molecule. Why care? It may sound simple, but it's actually really important for your health as it helps with gene expression, detoxification. That's where I have trouble. And neurotransmitter synthesis. I may also have struggle with that because of my poor methylation. So it helps with gene expression, detoxification, which is really important. They all are, and neurotransmitter synthesis. Methylation is critical for your overall health, and it plays a significant role in preventing chronic diseases, such as cardiovascular disease, cancer, and neurodegenerative diseases. This is really important to know. And again, remember, the research I ran across in grad school that I believe is related to this is that about 40% of people who have chronic conditions, keep this in mind, I believe have this issue, okay? It's really, really important to know this information because it can make a difference. There are things that you can do to affect your genetic expression, okay? And it's also really important, I believe, to find a practitioner who can help you get tested, get your genetics tested, okay? It's good to know what you're dealing with. When methylation is not optimized, it can lead to various health problems such as fatigue, depression, anxiety, and even an increased risk of cancer. It plays a crucial role in the prevention of chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease, cancer, and neurodegenerative diseases. This is super important. Methylation also directly affects your energy levels, mood, and cognitive function. I've experienced all of this. This is something I battle on a daily basis, and I'm one of those people that I cannot tolerate alcohol. I cannot tolerate prescription drugs. I'm super sensitive to caffeine. I'm super sensitive to refined sugar, and this is a big reason why. I have trouble detoxifying. To keep it simple, I have trouble detoxifying things. My body actually sometimes makes them more toxic in the process of detoxifying them. So I have to be really careful about what I consume. I've learned the ins and outs of kind of what works for me, but I have to stay on top of it. And it's a lifestyle, but it does make a difference. The choices that you make that can affect your genetic expression, which is what we're talking about here, they make a difference. Okay. So when methylation is not optimized, it can lead to various health problems such as fatigue, depression, anxiety, and even increased risk of cancer. I may have already read this part. Genetic mutations and environmental factors. This is really important, environmental factors, because I'm very sensitive to environmental toxins, and I'm also sensitive to a lot of things in my diet. So environmental factors such as poor diet, environmental toxins, or exposure to toxins. I'm sensitive to synthetic fragrances, for instance, so those can affect my methylation process. Stress as well can impair the methylation process. I'm going to read that to you again. Genetic mutations and environmental factors such as poor diet, exposure to toxins, and stress can impair the methylation process. All three of those things, poor diet, exposure to toxins, and stress, that those all impact how I feel on a daily basis. And that's why I have to, on a daily basis, watch what I'm exposed to, be careful of what I eat, and watch my stress levels. They all make a difference in how I feel because I don't methylate well. Testing and causes. Testing for methylation status through blood work or genetic testing, which I had done. I had both done. I recommend you do it too. They can provide valuable insights into your body's overall health. This can be done with the help of a holistic health optimization practitioner. And so again, Dr. Anders, who wrote this whole thing I'm reading to you, he is a holistic practitioner. I believe he's taking patients, I believe. Testing for methylation status can provide valuable insights into your body's overall health. Blood work can measure the levels of specific nutrients such as folate and vitamin B12, which are essential for methylation. And I want to say here, for those of you who watched, do you remember I think it was called Laguna Beach? Do you remember that show from a long time ago? Bo, is it Bo? One of the people that was on that show, Laguna Beach, she also has this issue. And she actually has now a whole line of supplements out and some of them help with the methylation process because she has the exact same issue. and she got very, very sick until they figured out what was going on with her. I'm pretty sure she has the same issue. So I think her name is Bo something, or Lo, maybe it's Lo. She's from that show called Laguna Beach, and she has a line of supplements now. Some of them address methylation. She has one, I think, that has like folate. You want supplements that are methylated, like methylated folate and methylated B12. So I'll read more from here. So again, blood work can measure your levels of specific nutrients such as folate and vitamin B12, which are essential for methylation. Genetic testing can also provide information about genetic mutations that may impact the methylation process. Genetic mutations, such as mutations in the MTHFR gene, that's what I have, can impair the methylation process. Now, I have other genetic mutations as well, but this is the one that really stood out to me. There were a few that stood out, but this one really stood out because I was able to connect the dots with my own research on methylation and connecting the dots with what I was experiencing. So it's really important to be a health detective in your own wellness journey and really, really pay attention to what's making you feel worse, what makes you feel better. Be really, really mindful of whether it's toxins or stress or environments or foods you're eating that are causing symptoms to flare up in you, and you want to remove them as much as possible, or diminish them as much as possible, or find an alternative. So say, for instance, I can't really eat refined sugar. It causes me all sorts of symptoms. I do a little bit better with evaporated cane juice, for instance. Okay, so one of the most important aspects of methylation is its impact on gene expression. Methylation can turn genes on or off, which can have a significant impact on disease prevention and overall health. I'm going to read that again. One of the most important aspects of methylation is its impact on gene expression. So genes can be turned on or off depending on factors that we have control over. Methylation can turn genes on or off, which can have a significant impact on disease prevention and overall health. For example, methylation can turn off tumor suppressor genes, which can lead to an increased risk of cancer. On the other hand, methylation can also turn on genes that promote detoxification and reduce inflammation. So it can work to your advantage. It really depends on, generally speaking, as far as I understand it, what we have control over are what are called epigenetic factors, meaning above and beyond the gene, meaning lifestyle factors, diet, how we manage our stress levels, doing our best to take care of ourselves. I know it's hard to sleep well, but we want to do everything that we can that's in our power to help our genetic expression, be positively impacted. So, okay. Methylation can be affected by a variety of factors, including genetics. That's my experience. Diet, which is what we have control over. Lifestyle, we have control over that. And environmental factors. We mostly have control over environmental factors. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're exposed to something that's right near where we're living and we don't have control over it. Or sometimes, let's say, I work in various situations like a classroom and someone comes in with a synthetic fragrance on. I don't really have control over my exposure to what they're wearing, although it deeply impacts how I feel because I cannot process that synthetic fragrance. I talk a lot about synthetic toxins in my book, and I believe synthetic fragrances, one of the things that they use on it is nerve gas. My body can't process it. I can get really, really sick. I get tons of symptoms, brain fog, fatigue. I feel horrible with a lot of synthetic fragrances. I don't have control over if I'm in a public space and someone else is wearing synthetic fragrances. That's impacting my ability to detoxify that fragrance as the toxins from that fragrance pass through my system. So it's a big deal. I talk a lot about that in my book. So how do I fix it? I'm reading again from this. In addition to dietary changes and reducing exposure to toxins, you do it as much as you can, right? And I want to say on this note that I had to move. I was living in a place that I was had new carpeting and paint, and I got super sick. And I tried to use a filter to kind of pull the off gassing from the paint and carpeting out, but it only worked to a certain degree. But my symptoms got far worse when I moved into my new condo that had new paint and carpeting. So I finally, it got so bad I had to go stay in a hotel or a motel for like a week. It was that bad. And I actually had a new chair that I had bought. I had it custom made actually, but they had put some kind of fire retardant on it. And I was super sensitive to it. And I was trying to air it out, but it was winter. And I finally had to have them come remove this custom chair and a half that I had made for my new condo. And I couldn't even stay. It got to the point where it was so bad and I felt so awful from the fumes and the off-gassing from this beautiful chair and a half that was made for me, that I had to go and stay in a motel until they could remove it from my condo. Even then, after they removed it, I was still very sensitive to the paint and carpeting. And I never felt well living in that condo. I finally had to just move altogether. Okay, so how do we fix it? So in addition to dietary changes and reducing exposure to toxins, very important, there are specific supplements that can help to optimize methylation. For example, supplementing with methylated B vitamins. We were talking about that. Methylated folate, methylated B12. So he talks about methylfolate, methyl B12. They spell it out as methylcobalamin. That's B12, I believe. They can help to support methylation. Methylated folate, methylated B12. You want to look for those in supplements. Other important nutrients for methylation include magnesium, zinc, and vitamin D. I've been taking vitamin D. I'm gonna try to take more because I think a lot of chronic conditions are implicated in low vitamin D levels as well. Bottom line, in conclusion, understanding the role of methylation in your body and taking steps to optimize it can have a significant impact on your overall health and well-being. This is what I have found to be true. Now I have to stay on top of it because I have a genetic mutation, meaning I cannot change my genetic mutation. All I can do is work with it on an epigenetic level. All I can do is work with it on a lifestyle level. I can control my diet. I can try to control toxins I'm exposed to. I can try to control my stress levels. That's what I can do. And those make a huge difference for me. And it's something I have to do every single day. Some days I do a better job than other days, but it makes a huge difference for me in terms of how I feel. And I believe that poor methylation can lead to what are called fatigue syndromes. So in my research, when I was in grad school, I do believe that this is one of the categories that was mentioned as being as a contributing factor to what are called fatigue syndromes. So they didn't necessarily say chronic fatigue syndrome, but they said fatigue syndrome. So there are other syndromes. I can't think of what they would be, but we obviously know about chronic fatigue syndrome. They call it a syndrome because they don't know what it is. But this is, I believe, a very big contributing factor. So bottom line, in conclusion, understanding the role methylation can play in your body and taking steps to optimize it can have a significant impact on your overall health and well-being. So true. I cannot emphasize this enough for you. Now I realize that some of you might have other conditions going on. I completely get that, but I highly recommend getting tested for this, because if this is a factor for you, there's a lot you can do to make yourself feel better. By eating a nutrient-rich diet, super important. And I'm still working on this, believe me. It can take years to develop nutritional deficiencies. It takes years. So it can take a while to help your body start to kind of get replenished as well. Focus on a nutrient-rich diet. Reduce exposure to toxins. And my book goes into great detail about different types of toxins that you might be exposed to. It could be makeup that you're using. It could be perfumes or cologne that you're using or being exposed to. There's a huge list. environmental toxins and are everywhere, and fragrances are not regulated. And they're in everything now. So even to this day, if I might buy something accidentally thinking that it's natural, and natural is a relative term, by the way, and it can have a synthetic fragrance in it, that just knocks me off my feet. And I immediately get a headache, brain fog. I start getting symptoms, and then it takes me sometimes a day or two or longer to recover, because that has to pass through my system now, and I have to methylate it. Basically, I have to detoxify it. It takes a while because I have this genetic condition. But by eating a nutrient-rich diet, reducing exposure to toxins, and supplementing with specific nutrients, preferably with a full supportive protocol for your specific body, and testing for methylation status, you can support your body's natural methylation process and promote optimal health. So this is written by Dr. Anders. And again, come check out this post. You can, if you need help contacting him, you can write to me. You can follow me on Facebook, Edie Summers, and private message me. He is in our group here. He's in our private group here on chronic fatigue support. So you could come join us, and you should be able to contact him that way. But if you're having trouble, private message me either on Facebook, Edie Summers on there, or I'm on Instagram too. You could also direct message me on there, or you can email me if you don't do any of these social media sites. You could probably write to me on YouTube as well. I do get messages on here, but you can email me if you need help contacting him. Edie Summers, that's my name. You can see my name on the screen here. Or if you're listening, Edie Summers, EDIE, S as in Sam, UMMERS @gmail.com. This guy is really good. I've spoken with him. We've had several conversations. He's very holistic, and I believe that he has dealt with chronic fatigue himself. Another doctor that's also dealt with chronic fatigue, hang on, I'm going to look him up. I don't think he takes patients, but he does some really great content, and he occasionally will talk about it. He definitely talks about energy, and he had chronic fatigue syndrome, so he understands. He writes really well about it because he's been through it as well. Okay, so hang on. Let me see if I can find him. He's usually always posting. It's Dr. Mark Hyman. He's very famous. Dr. Mark Hyman, MarkHyman. He's a medical doctor as well, and he also does functional medicine. But he had chronic fatigue syndrome himself, I believe, or at least for sure chronic fatigue. And he's very good at talking about things that support energy. So I highly recommend those two guys. But Dr. Anders, I believe, is taking patients. So, okay, you guys, thanks for listening. I just wanted to share this with you. Again, my book goes over great detail about a lot of these topics. It took me 10 years to write. I'm going to show you my book. It's called The Memory of Health, A Journey to Well-Being. And again, it took me 10 years to write. I'm trying to get it in the frame there. And yes, originally I wrote it. It's the topic of chronic fatigue is my main focus in here. I talk about a lot of different theories of chronic fatigue, what might be contributing. I also, of course, address chronic fatigue syndrome. I talk about a lot of other conditions that have chronic fatigue as a symptom. I talk about environmental toxins. I talk about so many different conditions that are related to chronic fatigue in any capacity: lupus, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, that's how it's called. Sometimes it's called SEID these days. I think we kind of did away with that now, but I think we're back to CFS. You might have cancer fatigue. You might have multiple chemical sensitivity. You might have electrosensitivity. You might have burnout. If you have any of those types of situations, you've been through trauma. I address all of these things in my book. It has a ton of research in it. Again, I was in grad school when I wrote my book, The Memory of Health. So I have a lot of research in there as well. And I talk a lot about nutrition, self-care, mindfulness, all the different tactics that have worked for me. I'm hoping that I wrote it in a way that I was, even if it didn't directly affect me, meaning that it wasn't a condition that I was experiencing, but it was somehow related to chronic fatigue, I put it in because I knew that it may resonate with someone. And my goal in writing the book was for you to be able to find yourself in the book and then say, that sounds like me. And then I offer suggestions. There are a lot of tactics in there. But methylation was a huge piece of the puzzle for me. So when I learned that, it made a big difference. I mean, it definitely helped me put a name to what I was experiencing. And it helped me understand more of the tactics I could do. I was already doing a lot of the tactics because I used a lot of for me, I was able to sense my symptoms. I was able to sense what my body was asking me to do more when I started not feeling well in my 20s. I believe it's related to the concept of interoception, where I was able to just sense the signals that my body was sending to me and asking me how it was asking me to adjust, whether that was something I was consuming or reducing stress. A lot of it has to do with, you want to remove stressors, whether that's food that you're eating, situations that you're in, things that are stressing your body out, or toxins, things that are toxic to your body. Those are going to, a lot of times they create more symptoms in your body. And so if you can reduce or remove those, and focus on supporting your body, supporting your heart, supporting your mind, supporting your spirit, being in a healthy environment. There are so many tactics, and I cover all of them in my book, The Memory of Health. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope some of this information helps you. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.